Hello and welcome to SIAL TV. I'm your host, Marc-Antoine, and now we will be talking about consumer trust. Very important subject, how to restore and protect it across the food value chain. And to do so, I'm very happy to welcome you all to this round table. Welcome. Peter Freedman, you are the Managing Director of the Consumer Goods Forum. With you also Sabine Ritter. Welcome, Sabine. You're the Executive Vice President and in charge of sustainability, a very important domain. And also Sharon Bligh, hello, Director of Health and Wellness at the Consumer Goods Forum. And finally, Jessica Wigram, hello, you're the Director of Food Safety. So, just to put you at ease, I am no expert on consumer trust, so I will ask very candid questions, so don't be afraid to, to tell me all about it. Well, Peter, shall we start with the first question? Could you tell me exactly what the Consumer Goods Forum is?
Well,
that's a first good question.
It's a good question. It's a good question to start with. So the Consumer Goods Forum is an industry association. It's a not-for-profit organization bringing together manufacturers and retailers and service providers across the world. So we're a global organization.
Okay.
In fact, we're probably the only organization that globally brings together both manufacturers and retailers. We have about 400 members. We have a very, very simple mission, which we've stuck to ever since we were founded, which is two parts. Part one is we're helping manufacturers and retailers to collaborate for efficiency between them across the supply chain.
Okay.
And part two is that we're here to make a positive difference for the people on the planet, essentially. It's as simple as that.
Fantastic. Well, that's quite a good, a good motivation. And why do you work on consumer trust?
So consumer trust obviously is very closely linked to the second objective, making a positive difference. But you know, there's a couple of other simple reasons why we work on consumer trust. First of all, basically this industry, particularly the food industry, serves most of the 7 billion people in the world, right? One way or another.
Yes.
And what better judge of whether we are a sustainable industry, whether we're doing a good job, than to figure out whether they trust the industry or not. So just as simple as that, if we all in the industry want to wake up in the morning and look ourselves in the mirror, what do consumers think about us? But more commercially, if you like, than that. There's an awful lot of research now showing that consumer trust actually drives growth, drives sales.
Okay.
So, and consumers, consumers think about brands. Do they trust a brand? And they also think about the industry. So it's quite hard to trust a brand in an industry that you don't trust.
No, of course. It's a lose-lose situation.
It's a bit
you
of
only
lose.
win one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So that's why collectively we work on trust as an industry. But essentially the motive is very commercial. It's because it'll drive growth in sales. And particularly nowadays when consumers are trusting perhaps a bit less the sort of established media, what they really trust nowadays is word of mouth.
Okay.
And you know, what do you say about a brand and what do I say about a brand to my friends? And what we say is very largely driven by whether we trust that brand or not. So that's why.
Okay. A quick word maybe from you, Jessica. Why is consumer trust very important?
I mean, essentially, when you're talking about
talking
about food safety, consumer trust is so important because the industry recognizes that every single consumer has the right to safe food, and actually that's why GFSI, the Global Food Safety Initiative, was established in 2000. It was really in response to two things at the time. So one was a complete lack of consumer trust in the food that they were buying. And one was just the reality that there were a number of food safety crises back in 2000 that the industry wanted to respond to. So the Global Food Safety Initiative was founded to really work collaboratively on what we could do on these key food safety issues.
Okay. And Sharon, you're in charge of health and wellness. So consumer trust is, of course, I trust, very important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've really seen that consumers are really looking more and more. Health and wellness is increasingly important for consumers. I think people really want to know what's in the food they're eating, what are they feeding their families. and the products that they're using. So we really see that health and wellness is a driver to build trust for industry, and we work collaboratively on health and wellness, and I'll let you know more about that. But it's hugely important.
Okay. And Sabine?
Yeah, now it's working.
Fantastic.
Okay. So obviously the third dimension to safety, to health and wellness is sustainability. And I think consumers, that's the data we see as well, and the feedback we're getting are more and more interested in sustainable food.
Oh, yes.
So sustainably sourced, produced, and also distributed, which I think underlies, I think, also the need to empower consumers to have the data so they can choose, so they are informed. They know that whatever the products, how they're produced, so they have the data to understand and can follow, how all of this is done, and so they have that security or information, transparency called. So transparency, I think, is a key underlying enabler for whatever we do in making sure that we build trust, and to empower consumer to do that. That's one of our key roles as well, beyond, I think, sustainability, which we do obviously as well.
Okay. And Peter, may I ask exactly what do you actually do to ensure consumer trust or can you tell me?
So I come back to...
It's a very candid question.
It's a very good question. What on earth do we do? So I come back to the importance of trust at a brand level and a retail brand or a manufacturer brand level and the industry level. And so we help companies, our members, at both levels. Essentially, as Sabine was touching on there, trust is driven by behavior. So consumers have to see both the company and the industry as a whole behaving in a way that looks after essentially 4 different areas. And again, there's a lot of research that says that these 4 areas of the behaviors in these 4 areas are the things that drive consumer trust.
Okay.
Number 1 is product quality and safety. Interestingly, what Jessica was just talking about. Number 2 is a sustainable supply chain. Number 3 is looking after workers in the company and upstream in the supply chain. And so if we help companies essentially by working in those areas, what we do is we provide essentially 3 types of opportunity for our members. One is we give them lots of information about best practices as to how you protect food quality, for example. Second is we ask them to join working groups where they can, in a much more intensive way, shape industry standards and share best practices in a very close working relationship. And thirdly, we hold events, larger conferences, where people can hear from those outside the industry about, again, best practices. So when they come home from any of these ways of working, any of our ways of working, what they bring home is best practices and standards that will drive both growth and efficiency, essentially.
Okay. And in food safety, for example, Jessica, how do you tackle the question of food safety?
I think Peter really just summed it up by saying best practices and standards, and that's really, really what we're about. And I just looked at an article that's going to be published soon, which refers to GFSI as the food world's biggest story of technical cooperation. And
GFSI, if you could just...
the Global Food Safety Initiative.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
And so really I would see the work that we do and how we restore consumer trust falling into really 3 areas. So what we concretely do, first of all, is we collaborate. Essentially, Peter said, retailers, manufacturers. GFSI also brings in catering and food service companies to really work across different working groups. He talked about working groups. We have about 20 working groups and subgroups within the Global Food Safety Initiative. That's 150 food safety experts representing 120 companies. Many of them are global. So when you think about the lives we're touching through these companies and these people driving food safety, I think it's fairly impressive. I would say, secondly, GFSI, what we really have is a concrete technical value proposition. So Peter talked about standards, and really what we've done is we're driving best practices and harmonizing food safety standards. So what we have is all of our best practices in one document. we put this document and food safety management schemes in the marketplace through a benchmarking process, and the industry recognizes the value of these food safety management schemes that are then recognized. So concretely what happens, a company like Walmart sends out a letter to their suppliers, says, we want you to be recognized against one of the GFSI Global Food Safety Initiative recognized schemes, and then we would be interested in collaborating with you. So if you think that you're driving food safety across huge supply chains like Walmart, then actually you're trickling down food safety best practices all across the world in global supply chains and actually downstream as well.
Wow.
And then I would say, thirdly, really what we have is we take into account all actors of the supply chain and not just the big ones. I just mentioned Walmart, but their suppliers, they have big ones as well as small ones, and we need to recognize that all consumers have the right to safe food. So you could be in a market where perhaps the companies around you aren't equipped to have the same access to food safety technology that we have nowadays. So how can we really bring those smaller companies up to the same level, ensure that they're producing the same food, and then at the end of the day, ensuring that all consumers are having the right to that safe food.
Okay.
So.
And health and wellness, and we'll talk a little bit about this. You're here to restore confidence? Because from my understanding of food safety is really to protect consumer trust. And health and wellness, you tell us a little bit more.
So as I was saying, trust, I think we really see the trends now that people want to have healthy options. I think people have never had more choice in terms of what they can eat and use in terms of healthier products. So what we've done is we've put together a framework, guidelines for our member companies to really help them implement different actions in health and wellness. So I'm here today at SIAL. We're celebrating 50 years of innovation. One of the things that our industry has done, we've been innovating in terms of health and wellness for a number of years. So if you look at, for example, product reformulation, what the industry has done, they're highly investing in research and development. They're taking out and enhancing the ingredients in products. We've taken out salt, sugar, trans and saturated fats from so many products that are available to consumers. Also, we're adding ingredients to enhance products in areas where the populations need additional nutrients. We have fantastic examples from our member companies, some of the retailers who put a target of reducing sodium or sugar by 25% by 2015. And then what we do, as Jessica said, we bring all of these companies together collectively, and we as the forum, we've set ourselves public targets that we measure and will report on, that by 2016, for example, we want to share all of the nutritional policies of all of our member companies. We want to share all of those best practices and really look at what we can do across the supply chain in terms of enhancing products and making that healthy choice and an easy choice for people.
Oh, very good. And Sabine, the sustainability, of course, as you said, Peter, is one of them. Second point of the consumer trust, driven by
environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So you come in, and that's quite a big responsibility.
Well, yeah, and I think that it comes into, I think, what we're actually trying to do is empowering consumers to make sustainable choices. So it's really enabling transparency and enabling, I think, a measurement. So we're working on a global standard to measure the impact and the footprint of products along their life, so to say. And we're also then providing means for companies then to share that information. So a consumer can really make that choice on the spot by knowing what sort of footprint that is, and so making that tangible and accessible whenever a consumer wants to buy things. But we also support companies, in developing best practices. So the question is on what area? So we have identified 2 key areas, climate change and waste. So what we're working really with the companies and others actually, because companies, even with 400 members, can't do this by themselves. Yeah. So we have a close collaboration with governments, with all the other stakeholders along the value chain in what I call modestly a market transformation. Because if you really want to decrease the impact of climate change on the product, you really need to look into involving all players. For example, let me take climate change, deforestation. You know, deforestation is a key driver for climate change. And it's driven by ingredients like palm oil, like soy, which are used in many, many, many products here. So what we really need now to do is a commitment by the companies not to source any palm oil, for example, which is really causing the deforestation of forests.
Yeah.
So again, like the GFSI methodology, you know, we're working with companies to develop a process and some guidelines so that helps them to really implement that and not source from these, how would I say, sort of non-sustainable sources anymore. That would also require that you make sure that the supply is available. So in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in South and Latin America, that, you know, that farmers think differently on this, so that they're prepared to make that shift. So this is a whole really market transformation, and it requires all of us and all companies moving in that direction. And that's what we do on this area, but also on food waste. We are really looking at the moment in understanding where food waste is happening, how we can measure it. So, you know, the Walmart, you know, you mentioned that, and Carrefour and Ahold and other players measure it the same way. You know, the manufacturers measure it the same way. So we can really identify where are the key areas we want to focus our activities. And from that, then also develop clear targets where we would like to, you know, encourage our members to go. And as said, we can't do this by ourselves. So we're, for example, have a close alliance with some of the leading governments in this space, with some of the key growers, but also NGOs. So they play a key part in giving us feedback from the consumers, advising us, you know, what's the right way to do this.
Oh, very good, very good. What I like is this sort of a win-win situation that you're trying to create, both for the consumer and for the manufacturers. Well, thank you very much. We don't have much time to say more, but if you'd like...
well, can I just maybe,
of course,
maybe
yes.
add just a couple of points. One is we've talked about food safety, health and wellness, and environmental sustainability. Just to let folk know that there are two other areas that we work on, which are again linked to consumer trust and efficiency together. One is digital. So
Yes.
the impact of digital on the industry is huge, but it also has a big impact on consumer trust, because all of us are worried about what the industry is going to do, what industry is going to do with our data when we give data. So digital is a huge area of consumer trust, so we also work on that in similar ways. And the last one is social compliance, so labor practices upstream in the industry. And again, we work in similar ways, spreading best practices and sharing standards. Second thing I wanted to say is just to emphasize we are global, and the particular contribution I hope we make is to bring manufacturers and retailers together globally, so that we're spreading best practices from Asia to Europe and vice versa.
Okay.
And we're the only organization that does that. And then the last thing is, just in case you think consumer trust and environment and all the rest are sort of nice to have things, I just come back to, you know, why do it? You're one of your first questions. Ultimately, the things we work on and help our members work on drive growth, because the more consumers trust our industry, the more they'll buy of our products, the more comfortable they will feel buying our products. But also the areas that each of my colleagues work on drive efficiency. So both growth and profitability, if you want to be very commercial about it, come from the things that we work on.
Okay. Well, fantastic. All right. Thank you very much for being with us today, and I will see you next on SIAL TV.